My single greatest accomplishment in my entire life, my single biggest accomplishment, my whole life, is you. That's what I think in my very limited perspective. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Appreciate you.
May it be possible for you to make a reading list? For example, on your Discord or Substack, it can be amended if you have any new recommendations. Plus, it would help your movement grow.
There is an infrared recommends in the Discord. Yeah, I could. I'm not sure how helpful it would be, but I could. I'm not sure, right? I don't know if it would be helpful because it's like, okay, if you guys want me to tell you the truth, I am a self-taught person, and it's very hard for me to teach people to get to where I am. Although I think I'm doing it unconsciously and consciously, and like I can't tell you what to read because nobody told me what to read. I started with Zizek, and I very autistically would read everything by Zizek and watch all of his public lectures, all of them. And by myself, I would force myself to be like, okay, what is he saying? How can he say this and this at the same time? What is he actually saying? How can I learn him so that when I read his next article or read his next book, it will make sense to me, right? That's what I look for. I look for like what is he actually trying to say? What is the pattern here? What's the pattern and what does that pattern mean? What does that pattern entail? So my way of mastering Zizek was already going beyond Zizek because I had to ground the patterns of why Zizek would say the shit that he did in some kind of meaning that I think is oblivious to Zizek himself. I had to be like, for example, when Zizek talks about Lacanian psychoanalysis, I had to really get into the nitty gritty of like, okay, but what is a signifier, right? What is a symptom? What is the Borromean knot, for example? What is object A? And then I told myself, I didn't say, oh, I don't want to know the definition based on what a Wikipedia article or what a professor said. I want to know what it actually fucking is. Like, what actually is it? And then lo and behold, nobody knows what object A really is. It's a vague kind of structure. It's describing a relation, right? It's a relation. It's a kind of logos, if you will. But that's it. It's a relation. That's all object A is. What is it actually? And then me, I'm like, okay, what is it actually? It has to be something like real, right? It has to describe something actually real, not just some kind of. I didn't like how, in the French school or in the American interpretation of the French school, they're like, yeah, it has to be a mystery. You have to keep that ambiguous. Don't probe the real. Don't have metaphysical enthusiasm. No, fuck you. I don't care. I'm not just going to dwell in some institution. I want to really understand what this is, right? So I came to the conclusion that something like object A is describing, fucking cosmological apocalypse, right? Like Ilyenkov. Not necessarily that, but I'm just saying, like, yeah, for example, it's something very much real, right? So what I'm trying to say is that the way I learn is not actually learning. It's synthesizing new ideas. There is no way I could learn about any given subject without having an independent idea about it. I couldn't, for example, you told me, Haas, go fucking study electromagnetism, something I've done here and there, by the way. There's no way for me to study electromagnetism without synthesizing new ideas about electromagnetism. And that's why I don't do the school thing, right? In law school, I hated it because I cannot learn about law without synthesizing something new about law. There's a price to pay for learning, and that price is a new idea. And that new idea should actually simplify the entire web of knowledge serve as a kind of heuristic, if that's the correct word to use here, with which others can learn easier. So although it's kind of hard for me to teach you guys a lot of things, the catch happens to be that you guys have you speed runned like 10 years of my fucking life. You guys speed runned a big chunk of my fucking life, like years. So like the infrared's been around for like a year, right? 2 years tops. And everything you've learned since then, things you take for granted in memes, like memes you take for granted, took me like a fucking decade to get to. So that's why it's about simplification. The new idea to synthesize things is a form of simplification. And whatever, Occam's razor, something that's true is simple, right? There's a reason for that. The simpler conclusion is always the more correct one. But the simplicity has to account for reality. It can't just be like, oh, Haas, how do you fucking explain complex things like biological systems? What if you just had a simple conclusion like that said, God did it? Well, because you would have to satisfy the datum with which you are trying to give some kind of explanation. You'd have to actually account for the complexity. That's what Occam's razor is actually about. So, yeah, I think that's my single. You guys don't have to tell me. I've like talked about this a lot, but my single greatest accomplishment in my entire life, my single biggest accomplishment, my whole life, is you. You guys are my single biggest accomplishment of my entire life. Easily. Even more than all the shit that I've written. Even more than all the debates I've ever had. It's you guys. My biggest accomplishment. So we've already broke through, right? This was the hard part. The hard part is over. And yeah, the hard part is over.